We've recently shot a commercial for one of our clients and we used the EOS R5 alongside our C300, and in this video I will be doing a full behind the scenes / job shadow, and I will be breaking down what equipment we used, how we shot the entire thing, all the way up to the budget, and I will be talking about how much money we charged for this commercial and where all the money went. So without further ado, my name is Damien Cooper and welcome to Monkey Picks. Before I start talking about the commercial, I think it's a good idea if we actually play the entire thing for you to get a feel for what this was all about. Unfortunately, the entire thing is in German, so unless you're a German native, you probably won't understand what this is about. But there's timestamps down in the description below, so you can easily skim it or just skip it entirely, and then we'll talk about the entire commercial.
Herzlich willkommen vor dem Eingang des Kurzbürgerzentrums. Wir sind hier im Goldenen Quartier, gleich neben dem Graben, und ich zeige dir heute, wie deine Brustoperation vom Erstgespräch über die Operation bis hin zur Nachkontrolle ablaufen wird. Hier ist der Eingang, los geht's! Der erste Schritt zur perfekten Brust beginnt mit einem unverbindlichen Beratungsgespräch. Im Rahmen dieses Beratungsgesprächs finden wir heraus, was für dich die perfekte Brust ist und welches Implantat wir dafür benötigen. Dazu verwenden wir eine der modernsten Technologien überhaupt. Es wird ein 3D-Scan deiner Brust erstellt und am Ende des Gesprächs kannst du dann in der VR-Brille deine Brust ansehen und eine Idee bekommen, wie deine Brust aussehen wird. Uns ist es besonders wichtig, dass wir höchstmögliche Sicherheit auch bei unseren Implantaten bieten. Dementsprechend verwenden wir speziell polyurethan beschichtete Implantate, die eine Reduktion der Kapselfibroserate um 90% in den Studien zeigen und auch ein Verrutschen des Implantats bei den tropfenförmigen Implantaten verhindern. Zusätzlich habt ihr auch eine lebenslange Garantie. Was unsere Patienten auch sehr toll finden, ist, dass sowohl Anästhesiegespräch, OP-Freigabe und Blutabnahme hier im Haus erfolgen und sie sich danach um nichts mehr kümmern müssen. Hier im Herzen des Kurzbürgerzentrums haben wir einen der modernsten OP-Bereiche Österreichs. Das heißt, vom Erstgespräch bis zur Operation findet alles an einem Ort statt. Hier wird die Patientin vor der Operation vorbereitet und dann von unserem erfahrenen OP-Team in den OP begleitet. Wir haben 3 eigene Operationssäle, die mit modernster Technologie ausgestattet sind, und hier finden die Operationen statt. Wir haben ein sehr eingespieltes OP-Team, das nur ästhetische Operationen durchführt, und daher können derartige Eingriffe auf einem sehr, sehr hohen Niveau durchgeführt werden. Von der Operation bekommt die Patientin natürlich nichts mit und sie kann sich danach auf unserer hauseigenen Station erholen. Für unsere Patientenzimmer haben wir versucht, die Vorgaben einer modernen Klinik mit dem Ambiente eines 5-Sterne-Hotels zu kombinieren. Die meisten Patientinnen gehen noch am selben oder spätestens am nächsten Tag nach Hause. Bei der Entlassung erhältst du auch meine Handynummer, damit du mich auch außerhalb der Ordinationszeiten jederzeit erreichen kannst. Alles Gute, schönes Wochenende.
Dankeschön ebenfalls. Dankeschön, ciao.
Wir sehen uns dann bei der Kontrolle wieder, wo wir uns gemeinsam das Ergebnis anschauen. Hallo, grüß Gott, wie geht's Ihnen?
Sehr gut, danke.
Bitte, kommen Sie mit mir. Und ob die Patientin mit ihrem Ergebnis zufrieden ist, fragen wir sie am besten selbst.
Ich bin super zufrieden und liebe meine neue Form.
Let's start at the beginning. How did we get this job? Unfortunately, there's not too much value in here for you because this is one of our longtime clients and we shoot a commercial for them or some kind of video probably once a month for them for years now. So basically it was just an email, hey, we got this idea shooting this and that, and that's basically the end of it. So what was this project all about? If you watched it, you probably guessed it by now, and our client is a beauty clinic. So they wanted to have the doctor walk a potential client through the entire process of a breast augmentation from start to finish. So let's start with the pre-production. And pre-production was rather limited in this case because, as I've already mentioned, we got an email and most of the stuff was already laid out. The entire shot list was basically already there for the taking and the entire idea of the video was too. Also, we didn't have to get any actors because obviously the main person was the doctor from the clinic and the other people were also people that either worked there or a client that already had done a breast augmentation at the clinic as well. So all I had to do now was coordinate with the doctor, the patient, and everybody else involved. And I didn't really do a detailed shot list for this one, but more of a general timeline so that I had a feeling of how long every shot would take. And obviously we didn't have to take care of any locations because we filmed everything at the clinic. So how long did we take to shoot this entire commercial? We shot everything in one day, and it took us about 6 to 8 hours from start to finish. And now let's talk about the equipment, what we used and why. Our main camera for this was the EOS R5 with the 16-35 on the DJI RS2, and I also used a ring setup because I wanted to attach a lot of stuff to it, but I will cover this a little later. And why did we use the EOS R5 instead of the C300 Mark III? Mainly because of the autofocus, because the autofocus of the R5 is amazing. Also, we shot everything in 25 frames and we didn't need any slow motion on all the talking parts, so the 4K coming out of the EOS R5 is tech sharp and really amazing for talking at situations like this. Why did I choose the 16-35 instead of the 15-35? I didn't really want to risk having any kind of image stabilization wobble, so I just ditched the 15-35 and used the 16-35 for the entire shoot when shooting with the EOS R5. All of the shots that we did with the EOS R5 were all on the gimbal because we had a lot of movement in there and I really wanted to get some smooth shots transitioning from one scene into the other. And to have both cameras match perfectly, we used a gray card on every location in every room, indoors and outdoors. So whenever we switch locations, we used the gray card, set our custom white balance on the C300 and the R5 accordingly, and that way we had absolutely no problems of matching everything later in post. As our gimbal of choice, we used the DJI RS2 with the EOS R5, but not only that, we also used the digital photo ring that I just did a full review on. And we wanted to attach a lot of stuff to the gimbal setup, so we needed the ring to attach everything to it. We had an external monitor, we had a shotgun microphone, as well as an external recorder because the EOS R5 doesn't have any XLR inputs. Speaking of audio, this is our next category I'm going to talking about, and here it got a little bit tricky. As I've already mentioned, we've done a lot of work for them in the past, so all of our shoots have a set budget, and I will be talking about this a little later in the video, but for most of our work that we've done in the past, we didn't need a separate sound person because we usually just do interviews stationary, so that I can do myself because it doesn't really require a lot of work. But for this one, when we had him moving all the time, this is a different story. So I asked our client if we had additional budget for a boom operator to actually get better sound. Unfortunately, we did not for this shoot. Ideally, I would have mic'd him up with a wireless microphone. Unfortunately, due to Covid-19 regulations, we're not allowed to do that. And this also requires a lot of skill and a lot of time, and you really need to work on the actor, and currently we're not allowed to do that. So the only option we had was a shotgun microphone. And that obviously poses a couple problems, and the main problem is the distance, because when he approaches the camera, he's further away from the start and then he just gets closer and the audio gets better. So when he was standing right in front of the camera, I think the audio was actually fine, but when he was further away, it really didn't sound that professional, and that was somewhat unfortunate. The next problem we ran into was that we switched locations so many times and the audio characteristics of every room were totally different, and there was really nothing we could do about this. So overall, I'm not 100% satisfied with the audio coming out of this project, but with what we had to work with, I think it's alright, and we couldn't really do much to it anyway. And the reason why the client didn't really insist on the audio being that good anyway is because most of the times they were displaying these commercials on their flat screens with subtitles and no sound anyway. So the audio didn't really have that high of a priority on that shoot anyway. So the last thing I want to cover when it comes to the camera department is the lighting. And here we use the Godox ML60, and that is a small portable light that was actually amazing for the job. So there's two ways of powering the ML60 via NPF batteries. You have a battery plate that you can either attach directly to the light, or with a longer cable you can attach it to your belt or put it in a backpack or messenger bag. And that way you're really flexible of using this light out in the field. So the only thing I would have loved for this light to have that it didn't is a bicolor option. It was only daylight balance, so when switching rooms a lot, I would have loved to be able to tweak the light source a little bit to match our surroundings a little bit better. But overall, I think that the Godox ML60 is perfect for these kind of jobs, especially with this tiny portable softbox that it comes with and the detachable battery grip. So for these kind of situations where you have to illuminate a moving target, I think this does an amazing job and is a must-have in your tool bag. And with all of the equipment, I will link it down in the description below so you can check it out yourself. So that was basically it when it comes to the equipment, and I was really satisfied with the way we used it, except for the sound part, but with the lighting, the camera, the gimbal, everything worked totally fine, and I think we produced a really nice image. And I was glad that I used the EOS R5, especially because we had a limited time frame, and having to rig the camera on and off the gimbal all the time would have been a hassle and probably too much time, because overall we were really close in our time range anyway, because the doctor had to change outfits all the time, so did the patient, we needed to move locations, and especially with Covid-19 regulations, everything took a little longer too. Alright, now let's talk about the post-production. And first of all, I want to talk about the sound again, because obviously we had to sync our external sound to the internal sound of the EOS R5. And here I made a huge mistake, because initially we wanted to have two audio sources, one lavalier mic and the shotgun microphone. But since I already said we couldn't really use the lavalier mic, but I still had it plugged into the EOS R5. So now the EOS R5 wasn't recording any scratch audio because it was still attached to the lavalier, which wasn't turned on or mounted anywhere. So usually I would have just loved to use a synchronizing tool in post and just sync it via audio, but unfortunately I didn't have scratch audio, so now I had to sync everything manual. By now we actually invested into incl, track E and sync systems, so now we're using timecode for everything, and spoiler alert, these are amazing and I will do behind the scenes as well as reviews about these in the near future, so if you want to see that, make sure to subscribe. But overall this was a hassle and took quite some time to match all these shots in post, but well, it worked out anyway. So next up, let's talk about the transitions, and that was one of our big selling points for this video, because we really wanted to seamlessly go from one room into the other. And as I've already said, we didn't really do too much pre-planning, so I didn't have everything planned out entirely, so I decided everything spontaneously on set. So for example, whenever I ended a shot with a right pan, I knew that I had to start the next shot with a right pan as well. And that went for tilt reveals, up, down, left, right. And I also improvised a little, and I had this in mind prior to the shoot, but I really needed to find some ways to make this work on set, was frame blocking. And as you've seen in the video, I used this in two different locations. The first one was in the preparation room going into the operation room. So I needed to find myself something that was blocking my camera for its entirety. And here I used the bed. So I was working towards the bed and then I moved the camera down. And the important part here is that the camera is being covered by the bed in its entirety. So I needed a horizontal line that was going from up to down through my entire shot. So now I needed to start my next movement with an up and down movement as well, and then I just masked out where the bed actually started and mixed in the next shot when I was actually transitioning into the operation room. I also used this technique later in the video where the nurse was coming from right to left and I was transitioning into the next shot. And here again, it's really important that the person is blocking the entire screen for the entirety of the shot. So she's coming from the right side all the way over to the left. In my case, that didn't work 100%, so I had to cheat a little and put in a digital zoom right before that, so I was actually having her block the entire screen. I would have loved for this to not having to do in post, but there's always these little tricks where you can cheat a little and make it work and fix it in post. So as I edited everything in Final Cut Pro 10 as I always do, I wanted to raise our production quality by a little. So instead of introducing our doctor in the very first shot by just inserting a lower third, I wanted to spice it up a little and play a little bit with movement. So I used a plugin called callout titles, and I used this to introduce our doctor and play with a little bit of movement, have it mocker tracked to his body movement, so it gave this a little bit of an interesting feel. I also inserted the company's logo via video, and I think these little things actually spice up your production value a lot and don't make the video look a little boring afterwards. So if you're a Final Cut user, I highly recommend checking out their plugins, and there's a link in the description below. So the last thing I need to cover when it comes to our post-production section is the color grading. On the EOS R5 I shot everything in C-Log with the neutral matrix, and on the C300 Mark III I shot everything in C-Log too. And the way I color graded this was the way I usually color grade all of the footage. I just converted our footage back to Rec. 709. On the C-Log I did it manually, and on the C300 Mark III I used their Rec. 709 LUT, which is really amazing. And after that I only tweaked a couple of things here and there and added one of our custom LUTs that are specifically designed for the Canon mirrorless cameras as well as the cinema cameras from Canon. And I think the look actually worked out really well. And if you're interested in any of our LUTs, you can actually use our code commercial and put it into our store, and that works not only for the Canon LUTs but for all of the LUT packs on our website. And again, the link is in the description below. And although this gave us really good results really quickly, I didn't stop there, and I used a lot of masking in this to make it look even more professional. So for example, when he was coming out of the operation room into the hallway, he came from a really cool and bright place into a somewhat dark and warm place. So I used color wheels and I keyframed them to actually match the exposure as well as the tint. So the further he walked into the hallway, the more I ramped up the exposure gradually via keyframes as well as lowered the white balance. And I used this technique in several shots, especially because Bell couldn't really hold the light onto him at all times because otherwise the light would have been in the shot. So when he was walking towards the camera, the lighting also changed. So again, I tracked his face via a plugin called Color Finale, which does an amazing job of actually tracking masks, and I could actually do an entire tutorial just about this in the future, but that way I actually raised the luminance of his skin, also the general exposure, to match the same lighting when he was actually standing right in front of the light and the camera. And the most important thing here is the keyframing, so that it doesn't really look very abrupt or is too much when he was standing in front of the camera. So I actually used keyframes when he was further away and then gradually increased my color grading when he was getting closer to the camera, or vice versa. I also used some color masks here and there to actually decrease the exposure on some things that I didn't really want to have highlighted in the outer skirts of my video and draw more attention towards my actor. I also used a little bit of a vignetting in a lot of shots for the same reason. So that I think covers it all when it comes to our pre-production, our shooting on set, as well as our post-production. So now let's talk about the budget. And here it gets a little tricky because, as I've already mentioned, this is a long-time client of ours and we shoot a lot of videos for them. So we actually have a package deal for 10 videos at a time, and they benefit of some discount. So one of them being that we don't charge for pre-production and that they get another 5% of their entire invoice at the end. So I will be talking about how much this would charge if we were only shooting one video for one client, and the reality is a little lower, but somewhere around that. So for pre-production, I charge by the hour, and usually I only charge by day rates, but for pre-production it's a little different because it usually is an hour here, an hour there. For example, if you have to check out a location for half an hour, or if you're just starting to write a script for an hour, you can't really charge by the day. And here I charge 150 euros an hour. So overall for this project, that would have probably come down to 2 hours for writing the script, coordinating all the actors, being on phone calls with the patient as well as the doctor, and just coordinating everything in advance. So after the pre-production, there's our shooting day rate. And our shooting day rate currently is 1700 euros. And that includes 900 euros for me as a main shooter as well as the director, then 500 euros for Belle, which does a little bit of everything. She does first AC work, but in that case she also used the light, and she helps setting up interviews and just setting up the lights, etc. So that is 500 a day for her. And lastly, in a day rate like this, I also charge for my equipment. And I don't list every piece of equipment individually with a price tag, but I do it more of an all-in solution. So that way I have the total creative freedom of using whatever equipment I want. And I don't open myself up to discussions of whether I need that piece of equipment. Do I really need this slider, or can we save a little bit of money if you don't use it? So I charge by an all-in rate. And that all-in rate for these kind of shoots is 300 euros. And I know that this is undercharging by a lot because usually the C300 alone with the lens is probably around 250 a day if you go to a rental house and rent it separately. So if I were to actually include everything, the lighting, the tripods, the cameras, the audio solutions, I would probably have to charge about 1,000 an hour. And I know that a lot of people do it that way, but I personally don't. And I think I already own all the equipment. I use it all the time for my own personal work as well as these YouTube videos. So I'm fine with just charging 300 a day. And the 300 a day obviously only covers what I have. So if we need some kind of special equipment that I don't own, then I need to charge for this additionally. So there you have it, 900 for me, 500 for Bell, 300 for the equipment, and that makes 1,700 euros a day. And that includes up to 8 hours. But including in these 8 hours is also the preparation here at home, packing all my bags, driving to the client and go back. So it's basically more like 6 hours on set. And lastly, there's the post-production. And for the post-production, I don't charge by the hour, but I don't even charge by the day because I also give my client an all-in solution. And for a video like that, I charge 1,500 euros. And in these 1,500 euros, it's included however long I need to take for editing these videos. And there's also 3 iterations of changes that my client can make. So I send them the final video, and whenever they want to make a change, I just do it. But then they only have 3 changes because otherwise they could actually stretch this out for a month and then ask for more and more changes. And all of this is actually written down in a contract. And if you're interested in these kind of contracts, you also sell them on our website. Link is in the description below. But really make sure that you set your ground rules for what is covered, what the client gets, what's the deliverables, when they need to pay you, and all that kind of stuff, so there's no misunderstandings afterwards. Also included in this 1,500 euro editing rate is all of our computers, the 5,000 euro iMac or 4,000 euro laptop, also all the music licensing from Artlist, Epidemic Sound, all the sound effects, but also all of our other software like Final Cut, Motion VFX plugins, or Neat Video, or whatever we need to make this video happen. And all of these costs actually add up over time, so we need to charge for them in our editing fee. So if, for example, the client exhausted their 3 change iterations and they want to have more changes made, so maybe they approach you after 6 months and they want to have something added to it, or they want to have something changed, a name change or whatever, then we charge by the hour for 150 euros an hour for that. So let's add everything up. So typically I would have spent about 2 hours in pre-production for 300 euros. Then I would have charged 1,700 euros as our shooting day rate. So we're at 2,000 euros, and then add another 1,500 euros for the post-production. So we're at 3,500 euros plus taxes. And that's what a commercial like this costs at Monkey Pixels. All right, and by the way, I actually made one tiny mistake in this commercial, and if you found it, please let me know in the comments below and tell me what I did wrong in this. And also, if you have any more questions, you can also let me know in the comments below, although I think I covered basically everything. And if you like this video, actually give it a thumbs up because it helps the channel grow. Subscribe for more, follow me on Instagram for more behind the scenes, and I hope to see you on the next one.